And so I thought that was
I
something
never
fair and
sent the
compromise to
mailing
do.
back, so I said, figured it was none of your business. I knew who the hell you were.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. That's all right. We get that a lot. That's fine.
Do you know how many people got that mailing, Seth? A number?
I don't know that offhand.
Okay.
I don't know that. I can find out, but I don't know that.
You know, in a second here. Well, I got, here, pass two of these over. Bob hasn't got one yet, Cindy ain't got one. Right there. All right. I talked to the IDA a week ago today, and we stand to get, when this thing gets started, right to start with, for a round figure, the first year, yeah, Bud's got one. The first year loan, $225,000, $224,599 the first year from the pilot. That's on top of what's in the host community agreement. And that goes on for 20 years, and there's a 2% figure that bumps it up some every year. And the only difference in this chart would be the year that it starts, you just change the years on there, because those other figures will stay the same. And it's figured on the town tax rate, the county tax rate, and the school tax rate. And you add all them together, you divide that into our town tax rate, and that's where you come up with 31.86% we'll get of the 5,300 per megawatt hour times the 3.5 megawatt per turbine times the 38. It comes out to 704,900, and we'll get out of that 31.86% of that. That's if the tax rate stays the same. And the only thing is, you can't go lower in the tax rate, or you're going to lower that pilot agreement. You're going to get less and less. That's what Clacton did to themselves. They screwed themselves. They need to do, when this gets started, you need to leave the tax rate right wherever it is, and go on from there. Now you take that extra money and you put it in reserve funds. Buildings, equipment. I talked to the state comptroller's office. You can put the money in reserve funds. There's no limit, and it can stay there forever. If you leave it in the general fund, though, you got to lower the tax rate. Well, then if you lower the tax rate, then you start getting less.
Well, I don't agree with, if it goes in the general fund, we gotta lower the taxes, because the state can come in and tell us that we need to, but they're not in charge of our money. We are in charge of our money, and we pretty much can do what we want to do with our money. But the reserve funds, it's the future of this town, and that's the way we should go.
The school districts do that all the time. Put money in reserve funds, and then they can buy buses and stuff like that with it later. Then they take it out. You hear them vote they'll take money out of a reserve fund to do a certain project. And that's where this comes from. The schools can do this very same thing. And this is what you're going to have to do with it. You don't want it, because if you keep lowering the tax rate down to nothing, then later, if the state never gets rid of that 2% tax cap thing, now you got a heck of a problem at the end of this whole thing down the road. Now what are you going to do? Clacton's having the same problem. Clacton's everything that you don't want to be doing. I know a lot of people think the taxes are going to go down. Well, if you could cut that right in half right now with that figure, just about, probably. But then you're going to get less the next year.
So we can never lower the taxes on
So if you lower the taxes to it, then you can't raise it back up, because you're bumping that 2% thing.
Because the pilot's going down.
Tax 22, isn't it?
Now, getting funding from that source, does the state ever come and say, you're getting enough money, so we're not going to give you funding for certain highway aspects? Or
No, like you mean the
in any situation,
the
whether
other funds that Lee gets? No. The one effect that's a whole separate.
And I don't know if the town gets money from the state by any.
Yeah, through the highway department.
I mean,
The CHIPS fund.
Is there a point where they say, well, geez, you guys are doing okay, we'll just cut this back?
No. The CHIPS fund, they can change that CHIPS fund anytime they want, and that's independent of your budget.
Right.
I thought Mo said a couple of years ago that there was a state law that you had to lower taxes by a certain percentage when you get windmill money.
No, not according to the state comptroller's office. And so the guy said the beauty of this thing is you can take this money and put it in there, and you got to set it up. You got to have a resolution for each one of them funds you want to have, and then there's some legal work to do with a lawyer, get it signed. Then you can put the money in, like capital fund. That would be these buildings, the building over there, the building down there. Put it in there. You can put it in an equipment fund. The only thing is, he says, it's a funny thing, you got to move the money from the general fund to the highway equipment, then from the highway equipment to the reserve fund. Because you
The
can't bring
highway's
it,
separate.
you can't bring it
Right.
back. Once it goes there, you can't bring it back. But then it can stay there forever. He says, oh, this guy told me, there's a lot of towns doing this as a way to save up and buy equipment later. Or buildings, or whatever you need.
And it's
So,
par-
so we can't lower taxes, so we can give to everyone, like everyone benefit.
Everyone's going to benefit, but actually not in lowering the taxes, not if you want to keep it.
How will they benefit? How will everyone benefit?
Because you're going to end up, later you're going to buy equipment that's going to be paid for, which we can't seem to come up with now. You're going to have a new,
What about the people who don't live on a town road that we're gonna use that equipment on?
well, I live on, but I don't do me any good either.
Well, that's what I'm saying. How is it helping
It-
everyone when we're
It's
trying
still,
to give
because later
everyone-
it's still going to help hold your taxes down. And then when you get down the road, you still got money, you can buy things without raising the taxes.
You could literally say that the taxes are never going up.
is any part of that equation based on the number of windmills?
Yeah, 38.
So
Right.
when it goes to the siting commission, they may reject some of these
Right.
some of
This-
these windmills for whatever reason. I know you've got alternative sites, but hypothetically, for example, if they shot 10 of them down, I don't even know if we have 10 alternative sites in the town. So
I
these
think-
numbers are based on 38,
I
right?
think, yeah, I think their number's based on 38.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
10 would be a lot.
Right.
I mean, I think, so I think just using Casadega as an example, there was 3 that they proposed to shoot down, and actually the judges ruled against them. They ruled in our
I
favor.
think Howard, though, I don't know if you have the stats on Howard. I think Howard lost some, though, too, didn't they? Do you know offhand?
Well, but it's a completely separate process. So
Right,
it's like
but
apples to oranges.
the point.
Yeah,
the point being.
So, but
Later.
so you might expect a few.
Right.
But even if it was, so say it was 35,
Right.
you know, your numbers may be about the same. Maybe it's like 200,000. You know.
And what about the megawatts, are they all gonna be 3.5? Are they gonna be 3 or 3.5?
I actually think that they'd be closer to 4, but I think 3.5 is conservative. But I would say most of the turbines we're seeing hit the market today are 4 megawatt class.
So you could lose turbines, but gain on it's still,
Therefore, it
everything's a
stay the same
multiplier.
even.
This will make it,
Everything's a
putting a
multiplier.
bigger one
Yeah.
there, that's,
Right.
Now this was Jamie Johnson's educated guess. He thinks that these figures are going to stay fairly close to what they are right now, what he had down on this sheet right now.
How does this equate into this whole thing? I know Trump's not for renewable energy, and I was reading up on the tax credits. If next year or the following year the tax credits disappear, how does that affect the whole process here?
So in the final tax law,
Mhm.
all the stuff in terms of the production tax credit incentive stayed the same. So none of that stuff changed.
I know it didn't this year, it went through, but I'm just saying next year or the following year,
Oh, I
if
mean-
they don't go through, then basically the windmills are pretty
Well-
much done, correct?
No, I don't think that's true. I mean, that's just a tax credit.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was part of that package. I don't think. I mean, you can never predict what
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, I was
politics gonna
reading-
do, but I don't think that's at least not what I understand. The 2018 goals are going to be. That's not part of it. I think the big 2018 goal is infrastructure
Right.
spending.
Yeah. Well,
As I
I'm just
understand,
thinking
it's a
down
big-
the road. I mean, everybody's
Oh,
talking about
well,
20 years here, and I know I
It's
read an
gonna
article.
start the PTC starts to phase out in 2020, so it's a short time frame anyway. So you know, it's really not something that's a long term thing.
But you can pretty well say, once this gets started, if you leave the tax rate alone for 2, 3, 4 years, I mean, the taxes won't go up. But if you lower them, if you lower it over here, you're going to take it over here. I mean, you can't have it both.
Unless, of course, they come in
Do you
and
have
reassess
that
everything, then it'll go up.
in writing from the state comptroller, Frank, or is that just your interpretation on a verbal communication with the state comptroller? Is that in writing so that you've got something?
There is if you go to the state comptroller's, what's the name of that? They call it a brochure. There's a thing in there about reserve funds. You can download it as a PDF file. It explains how reserve funds are done in the categories that you can have.
And Baldwin's told me that if we got extra money, we gotta set up reserve funds. Baldwin's all on board with that stuff.
And the percentages are what he interprets it to be?
Jamie Johnson.
No, Frank.
Percentages of what?
What you said, you don't lower the taxes, everything goes into reserve funds. The whole amount of money that the town gets can be divided up into reserve funds, and nothing has to be used any other way.
Could be.
It could be.
It don't have to be.
Right.
But you see, if you
For
turn around and you spend that money and lower the taxes, then the next year around with the pilot agreement, you're going to get that much less.
Right.
And you can figure it out with the sheets he gave me. I got some extras up here. You can take them, copy them, do whatever you would like with them. You can just see, and the schools get the way it figures out. The reason the schools are getting so much, everybody thinks, well, this is Albany telling the IDA. This isn't the IDA's idea. But the schools are getting 50% of that money because the tax rate is so much higher than the other two, the county and the town. And when you figure up the percentage, well, that's how it comes out. Because you could take $10.11 for the town, $5.58 for the county, and $16.04 for the schools. You add that up, and you divide that figure into the $10.11 for the town. That's how you get the 31.86% that we'll get of the 5,300 per megawatt hour times the 3.5 megawatt per turbine times 38. Now the 3.5 could change and the 38 could change, and that would affect us. And you won't know that until close to the last thing.
What about the schools? Will they not get as much funding from the state because they're getting this money?
No,
Doesn't make any
that's
difference.
actually
Doesn't make any difference.
actually if we lowered the tax on this thing right now, then the school and the county get a bigger percentage.
Right.
Because that figure with the 5,300 and all that calculated out, that's going to stay the same. Just the schools and the county would get more. So to keep getting what our share would be, you're going to when it comes time, whatever the tax rate is, you're just going to have to leave it there, figure up on that much money in the budget. Let's see. At least the extra you got left over, you got to put it in a reserve fund, or the state's going to have something to say about it eventually. And this guy at the comptroller's office said the same thing to me. He says the beauty of the reserve funds is it's a great way to bury the money, and there's no time limit on when you got to spend it. And there's no limit on how much.
They can be drawing into so all that time.
You know, if you can find a good account for it, yeah.
But the schools gain a lot from that.
Yeah, see, well, the same thing will happen to the schools. They got to take this money, and they can't, like, no, this is why you said they can't use it to lower the taxes, because this is what happens. If they lower the taxes, the same thing happens to them. They get less.
And the schools are going to do the same thing. They're going to start putting stuff in reserve funds.
Yep. The school taxes are going to stay about the same, and they're going to put it in a reserve fund.
They just get a magic budget increase.
That's what we'll be getting to.
So,
Buy another playground.
I could see the town and county taxes staying the same if that's the case, but for the school, our school taxes would go down.
Be kind of nice,
It's
wouldn't
like
it?
they're just gaining and gaining.
that's why the school taxes won't go
Really?
down. That's why they can't just use it to lower the taxes, because it'll do the same thing to them it'll do to us.
When this thing comes through, the town needs to hire a very good municipal lawyer, municipality lawyer, and help us with this stuff.
This is one of them deals, it's danged if you do, and danged if you don't.
Yeah.
You can't win on this one. So the only way you're going to come out ahead is you got to leave the tax rate about the same at the time this starts, and then go from there. And you actually every 3 or 4 years you should bump that up some, because when the time comes and the money runs out, you don't want to be bucking that tax cap if they don't ever repeal it.
Well, it's a lot of money and it's there. You better not let it slip away, that's all I got.
Yep.
You
I have
let
a
it slip
question
away,
with
it'll
it.
be gone.
Frank, you say you had an extra copy of that?
So you made a valid point that it should be everybody that is benefiting, and you're talking about taxes staying the same, and that I'm
Thank you.
very
Yep.
okay with that. Now, if our property values, because we're gonna have these up on our hill and the value of our homes drops, is there a property value guarantee anywhere in the host or anywhere where, or will our taxes be lowered because the value of our homes are gonna be lowered?
Can't lower your taxes now, he said.
That's my point, but if you're gonna do a revaluation of the value of our homes,
It'd be up to
our
the
value of
assessor.
our homes are gonna be less now that we're gonna be surrounded by these things. Wouldn't our taxes drop because the value's less?
The values would drop, or, you know, in theory.
That's what the property value guarantee, you know, something like that in this host agreement or whatever.
I don't think anybody's ever gonna guarantee the value of your property.
No.
Well, if you're
Just
building
seems-
stuff that's next door to me that I have no control over, it's, you know, it's like living next to the house that nobody wants to fix and whatever, and, but, you know, I would think if the value of my home is gonna depreciate, shouldn't my taxes reflect that depreciation?
See, if you revalued the town, but you still gotta take, when this starts, the last budget, and you gotta come up with that much in taxes, and then use the other money for everything else. See, and so then, if your value of your house went down, no, the rest of somebody else's went up, so it's still gonna come out with a tax rate to cover that.
Yeah, but
Budget.
my
The
house is
equalization rate.
by the value of whatever when you assess my home, and it's been raised constantly, the value of my
Where's it been
home.
raised? The taxes ain't went up in this town in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well,
I think we're going up every year.
I beg to differ on that one. But, my point being is whatever the value of my home is right now without huge turbines in my backyard and in front of me and all around me, what it's valued at this point right now, as opposed to when these are constructed, the value of my home is going to be less. So when you reevaluate my home at a lesser rate, then my taxes should drop because my home is worth less,
But they
correct? I
won't.
mean,
But they won't.
See,
But
because
why
what he's-
won't they?
Because you
what
changed the
he's
tax
saying-
rate to
'cause he's
make up the
we're gonna
difference.
change the tax rate, because we gotta keep it this level. So your house can go to
I saw-
crap, but we're gonna keep that tax rate. Your house can go down to zero, we're gonna just raise that tax rate, so it stays
well,
right the
that's
same.
ludicrous.
So the one thing I'd say there is, so all the research that's out there on that has said consistently that just because, and they've looked at big projects, small projects, because there's, you know, industrial sized wind turbines, doesn't decrease
See,
property
I
values.
beg to differ. I really do. All
And
due
there are,
respect,
so,
I care
so
about you.
certainly,
But-
some people at
Would
the
you
time.
would any of you want to sell your home and buy my house with the turbines behind it? I mean, really,
There may not be stats bearing that out, but I think most of us, it's just common sense, you
It's
know,
just
when
common
when you
sense.
buy a place out in the country, you're looking for the beauty of the countryside, and, you know, you go to the realtor and say, I want a place in the country with a nice view or whatever. I don't think you're gonna be finding too many people going to a realtor and saying, geez, I'd like to find a place with a nice view of the windmills. So, even though there's statistics not bearing that out, I think it's just, you know,
and
kinda
also
common
with all
sense,
the
that's all.
negative,
agree.
the
There's some
negative
people won't be-
publicity,
Right.
and the studies that are being shown of the negativity, the negative
All right.
aspects of them. I have a right to speak, sir. My attorney told me I could speak.
We gotta get on with the
And
meeting.
every time I speak, you
All
start
right.
hammering your hammer there.
The problem is that every time, so what question is, can I finish a question?
Wait
You
till
have a
I
right.
open it up to.
You
for-
have a right to speak, my
comment.
attorney said so. He hushes me, and yes, yeah, every
Everyone
time.
else gets to talk, but because we
How
don't.
about a
agree with
reading of the bills?
General account, $148.25. Highway account, $6,148.74.
I make a motion, we pay the bills.
I second it.
Roll call.
Smith,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Whitman,
Aye.
Osborne,
Aye.
Phelps. 5 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstain.
Yes.
Right. Now the meeting's open for public comment.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Can you go over the new company, BlackRock, that purchased Everpower? Are they gonna change? Is it gonna be?
Sure. So it's a little bit more complex than that. So there's actually two things that are going on. BlackRock is the company who's purchasing the operational side of the company, and then a company that we actually just, and so you guys know,